Here we are on. Here we are. Hello, people out in internet land. It is I, Nilda Duvo, and this is Christina Chiu. And here we are with a new Pen Parentis Literary Salon. This one is super, super exciting. It is about the environment and land rights and climate change and all these super important and earth-changing, earth-shattering things and how we write about them. Can we write about them in fiction, nonfiction, poetry, what? So it's very exciting. We have amazing guests for you. But first, a word from our sponsors. First of all, we want to thank our sponsors. So first of all, I want to thank Nancy for donating while she bought her ticket. Thanks, Nancy. And then I also, of course, have to thank our what do we call them? Longtime sponsors, our favorite friends, our awesome supporters, the DeGroat Foundation and the Poetry Foundation. Thank you guys so much for supporting us. We love adding more poets. We love helping new and emerging writers. So we love everything that you do. And we thank you for supporting our work. We also thank NISCA and the NEA and the Fund for Creative Communities, which is administered by LMCC. All these governments, local, state, and national support writers that have kids in this way. We really, really appreciate the support of our government and the arts, and we hope that you will also support the arts. So, and then our October sponsor, who is sponsoring this salon in particular, is ButterDocs. And ButterDocs is a brand new competitor to Google Docs and competitor to Scrivener. And it is, I've actually tested it now, and it is freaking cool, you guys. Like, first of all, it is so clean and beautiful and instinctive. You can actually figure it out. It's not like you have to read a giant manual to figure it out, but they have great support, and it's cool. Here's the best part that I saw, and I've really only played with it a little bit. So you know how you write things in chapters? So you can go to note card view and see all the chapters as note cards, and you can take notes on the note cards, and then you can move them around, and it will move around your main document. This is like earth-shattering for anybody who has tried to write anything long in Scrivener and been like, I have to move this around. Like, I am so excited by this thing. So we are very, very glad that ButterDocs is a sponsor. We're going to just put up a little thing. Anybody who's watching right now live can definitely download it for free. It is in the chat. So, you know, and also you chat people, we don't know who's out there. You have to write your name and where you're from in the chat, or we don't know that you're there. So, you know, say hi, and we will say hi right back. Later on, you can ask questions in the chat, and we will answer them right back. But now let us talk to Christina, who will introduce our very amazing cast of authors for today. Over to you.
Hello. So I'm Christina, and I am really thrilled about this salon. We literally arranged the salon at least a year ago. And so we've been waiting for these authors for a while. I'm really excited to be talking about the environment, climate, land rights. I mean, these are things that we're all talking about, and we want to know more about what's happening in literature and how, you know, literature, we always think literature are books that go on a shelf. No, they're not. They're really relevant. They're important to who we are as human beings. And there are so many people writing about these topics. So that's why the topics are always changing. And this month we have 3 amazing authors. We have Corbin Addison. He is the international best-selling author of 4 novels, 1 work of narrative fiction called Wastelands, the true story of farm country on trial.
Nonfiction. Nonfiction?
It's nonfiction, and it was winner of the 2023 Reed Environmental Writing Award. Our second author will be Virginia Hartman. She's a poet and novelist. The latest of her works is The Marsh Queen, a book of fiction. Finally, we have Jen Stever. She is in Nupiaq and a queer writer, mom, artist, and proud nerd, she says. Jen writes poetry and fiction. Her micro chapbook of poetry, Imuk and Cookies, was published in 2020. Can you show it? It's beautiful. By Kissing Diamond Poetry. Jen is currently a writer in residence at the Anchorage Museum, where she's wrapping up her second poetry collection titled Postcards from the All right. How do you pronounce it correctly? I'm not going to.
It's Inunyarvik.
Wait, say it again. Inunyaqvik.
Inunyarvik. And that is
Inunyaqvik.
That's awesome.
Inunyaqvik. Awesome. You guys, everybody take a look quick at who is out there. So first of all, Lexi Cherry is from Anchorage, Alaska. She is very confused, but she made it. Go, Jen, go, she says. Ryan Owen says hello from Boston. Jamie says hi from London. Lindsay says hello. She is a Alaskan native currently living in Florida who is siblings to Jen. Your sister's out there. Yay.
Yeah.
And Nancy's out there and she's in NYC. And Loretta says hi. Hey, Loretta, it's good to see you. She's very excited to see a Native American. And Drew has signed in from Sydney.
Yay!
Australia. That's amazing. Okay, so that's currently who has said hello. If you are out there, you want to say hello and you want us to say hi back, just drop us a note and we will happily say hi. See, Anna from Omaha. There are people from everywhere. This is very exciting. All right. I suppose we should get started with our readings, but I really like saying hi to audience. Go ahead. Who's first? What is going to happen now? We're very excited.
I think it's me. I am going to read 3 very short poems from my forthcoming collection. So Postcards from the Inunyarvik is a photography and poetry collection that literally they're postcards. They're going to take the form of mailable postcards. But I only write very, very short poems, so that's all I'm going to read today. I'm going to read 3.
Wait. It's mailable short. So you literally wrote and did the art. You did the art, or somebody did?
So I took photos. So one side of them is a photo that I've taken here in Alaska, and the other one is a short poem. And then there's a QR code to a soundscape. It's a whole really cool thing that the museum is putting together.
Cool.
Yeah.
And then they'll be sold in little packets so you can mail them to people?
So yeah, they're going to come in an envelope and then people can, take those and mail them to whoever they choose if they'd like to. Yeah.
Oh, Jen, I'm going to need those.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool.
Thanks, Annie.
Annie says they're absolutely gorgeous.
Yeah.
Annie, it's Annie from last time. Hi, Annie. Annie, this is great. This is so fun. Okay, so you're gonna read. Let's set you up so that we can see you. Hold on, just let us move you around a minute.
So this first poem is titled Disruption. Less ice, less food, less ice, more shipping, more noise, less food, less ice, more oil, more noise, less food. You try to eat amidst all this. You try to mate amidst all this. You try to navigate amidst all this. You try to communicate amidst all this. You think of the ice as inhospitable. This is what is inhospitable: warm, loud, open water. Less ice, less rest, less food, more noise. Less us. And then the second poem I'm going to read is titled On the Frequency of Rain. It's July, and everyone is worried about the frequency of rain. And I'm also thinking about the frequency of rainbows. What of the frequency of puddles and wet ankles and the quiet chill of drops from a canopy of birch leaves? What of the frequency of abandoning a child-sized fishing pole to splash and flood your boots? What of the frequency of dripping your canoe paddle across your lap as you pass it from one side to the other, careful don't drag it? What of the frequency of movie kissing and tears mingling with the clouds' tears and auras of streaky light hugging street lamps? What of the reflections of gray fluffy skies and upside-down trees? What of the frequency of double rainbows? And my third and final poem is titled Fairy. Girl stands on the shore, delights in the messengers of ice, whispers to her aqua blue friend across the water. He twangs and cracks back a code, a tale of their shared history. Woman stands on the shore, her friend steps, reaches, strains for her, curls unwittingly away. Each message is a piece of him, a sacrifice. Each whisper is a piece of her, a betrayal. They too are many. Elder stands on the shore. She is long alone. The carcasses of his messages dissolve, erode like her joints, crack like her voice. The story is garbled, yet she cannot go to him. She too is stationary now. Thank you.
That was beautiful. Thank you.
Just, I don't even know what to do. I'm so happy. That was wonderful.
So, Jen, when did the environment, like, were you a writer before you were actively thinking about the environment, or how did you start? How did it become such a big part of your work?
I think I was a climate or aware of climate well before I was aware of writing at all. Being Alaska Native, being Inupiaq, a lot of people, the general public in the United States doesn't view the United States as an Arctic nation, but Inupiaq people are on the front lines, and broadly Alaska Native people are on the front lines of climate change. So when I started reconnecting with my culture and writing about my culture, writing about climate was just a natural progression of that.
When you say on the front lines, what exactly do you mean by that, so people are clear?
My people, the Inupiaq, we're on the north slope of Alaska, and it is a place where one of the most rapidly warming parts of the planet. Sea ice patterns, sea mammal migration, permafrost, all these things are being very rapidly impacted.
Are you physically seeing it yourself? Like, I love having people on the ground say, this is what I have seen. Can you?
Yeah. So actually that third poem I read, Fairy, it's a sort of a fictionalized version of I view the character going from child to woman to elder as a fictionalized version of my mom. Just over the course of her lifetime, this piece in particular is speaking about the recession of Portage Glacier, which is something a lot of people here in Anchorage are very aware of because it's close to here. But just in her lifetime, the glacier used to be visible. They built a visitor center very close to it, and now the title of the poem is Ferry because you literally either have to take a very long hike or get on a ferry to go see the glacier because it has receded so far back across the water and through this valley in the mountains now. So all you can see from the visitor center is the lake in the summertime and an ice covered lake in the winter.
And this is in your mother's lifetime.
Yeah, and I don't want to out her or anything, but my mom's not very old, so but yeah.
Wow.
Wonderful. So Jen, we're going to
Sorry, okay, I wanted to just really quick before we switch on to the next person to just show you some of these amazing little comments that people are saying. For example, double rainbow all the way, OMG. And wait, and this is a hello from somebody that is from Canada. Hold on a second. Hello, Jenna Webb from a territory in Montreal. Yay, go. Okay, and wait, and here's one more fun one. Just real quick. The carcass of his messages. Lol, boy, get left. Love it. Okay, so please continue to write things. And when you click the little hearts, we actually see them. So we love that too. Okay, now, Christina, you may continue with the...
Okay, we're going to come back to you, Jen, because I want to talk a little bit about Alaska too, because when people talk, like I live in New York City, nature to me is Central Park. That's nature to me. But when I actually went to Alaska, I was in Homer at one point. The world seemed nature was very big. And it was so different. It was such a different way of looking at the world. It was incredible. So we'll talk more about that after we have our reading.
Yeah, looking
So-
So
forward.
that last comment about the temperatures rising in the Arctic about 3 times faster than in other parts of the world is from an environmental scientist who happens to
Yeah,
be.
that's actually my sister. Yeah.
Yay! Well, he's still an environmental scientist.
I know,
He
yeah.
is genetically related to you. So just saying.
Thank you.
Double bonus. That's so cool. Awesome.
Okay.
Okay.
So our next reader is Virginia Hartman. She has been with us before when the salons were in person. That was a while ago, way before COVID. And Virginia last read poetry. This time she's reading from a novel. So she's also an essayist, a poet, and the latest work is like a novel. It's called The Marsh Queen. She teaches fiction writing at George Washington University in DC and the Writers Center in Bethesda, Maryland. Her stories have been shortlisted for the New Letters Literary Awards and the Dana Awards. Everyone, please welcome Virginia Hartman.
Yay!
Thank
Good to have you
you,
back.
Christina and Milda. And I echo that Pen Parentis is a really, really wonderful organization, very supportive. And so if you're not a member yet, join.
Yeah, we'll talk about that.
I'm going to give you a little bit of context. This is the cover of the book.
What? So pretty.
Yeah, so it keeps with that water theme, Jen. It's set in a marsh. It's about a young woman named Lonnie Murrow. She's 36, and she's a bird artist for the Smithsonian here in Washington. She's been called back to her Northern Florida home, and which is situated by the marsh. Really, she's coming back to help her mother, but while she's there, she discovers a few things about her father's death in the marsh, in the swamp, that happened when she was about 12, but she doesn't know all the details, and she's kind of learning things that she was not aware of. So in this scene that I'm going to read, she also goes out into the swamp to draw birds because that's her profession. And of course, the Florida swamp is loaded with gorgeous birds. And there's one in particular that she's seeking. And she hasn't canoed these particular waters in quite a long time. And they have a lot of memories. So this is her first foray back into this particular set of waters. It doesn't take me long to smooth out my stroke. The water teaches you, my dad used to say. The open lake is flat, and soon the paddle slips cleanly through. I steer the canoe parallel to the mangrove trees that hang low to the water in thick clumps. A dragonfly does a halting dance at the bow of the canoe, and the cicadas sing out a metallic whine, rising, falling, and rising again. I dip the paddle in and let the canoe glide into a narrow waterway. Jesus bugs move on the skin of the water, leaving tiny wakes. The scene has its charms, but I haven't forgotten the dangers of what's below. Crabs and cottonmouths, gators and gars. This is the brown water that swallowed up my father. I round a bend and catch a sudden pocket of cool air, a welcome pleasure in the still heat. As quickly as it comes, it's gone. I reach the paddle to gather new water and hear my dad's instructions. That's it, Lonnie Mae. Stretch forward and draw the water to you. Push down your top hand and make your lower hand the pivot point. Now glide. Slipping past a patch of reeds, I slow to look for the purple gallinule, Porphyrola martinica. My father called it a pond chicken. No dead bird's skin can capture the way this creature walks weightlessly over lily pads and floating reeds. That's why I've come out today, after all, to get a drawing of one purple pond chicken. I skim close to every clump of bulrush, white wild rice, and pickerel weed. For a moment, the only sound is my paddle and the water. Then here come the moorhens, cousins to the gallinule, swimming around me. Their beaks are white and their feathers are black, where the gallinules are blue, violet, and rainbow shine green. They start up with their high collective cackle. Listen to them laughing at us, my dad would say. Get out there, Estelle said, before you lose touch. What exactly was that supposed to mean? I spy a limpkin among the reeds, poking its tweezer-like beak in the mud for apple snails. Crying birds, they call them, because of their baleful sound. They make it trying to get a mate into their nest. It almost sounds like a baby's wail. I do a quick sketch of the limpkin's long legs and slender curving bill, the variegation of its brown and white feathers. Then I paddle on.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So you've been getting a lot of really wonderful press on this book. You switched from poetry to fiction. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what are the differences? And when it comes to writing about the environment, I know you have a lot of that in your poetry as well.
Yeah, I haven't really switched because I do write poems just to kind of refresh myself while I'm writing something really long. It's really satisfying. I mean, a poem can take 25 drafts, and yet it still seems like it's done quicker than a novel, right? A novel takes years and years.
Oh my God.
But no, I think my relationship with the environment of Florida, I did grow up in Florida, and Florida has changed a lot. The topography has changed. Land management and water management has had benefits and detriments. And I hope that if people fall in love with the marsh as much as I love it, through this novel and through a lot of other things, that happen in the novel, in this setting, that they will think twice before, only thinking of Florida as, golf courses and
developing the wetlands so that they can have a house to live
right.
there.
So much of the wetlands have been lost to development. But there are these wonderful pockets still in Florida that are so wild and so teeming with life. There are a lot of endangered species too. So I think that needs more attention. But I think once people get out into the marsh, it's not just like, I have some swampland I want to sell you, which is the old joke about Florida. I think I have this really valuable resource. And that's what I want people to recognize. And not just in Florida. I mean, this is set in northern Florida, but there are a lot of places like that throughout the country, throughout the world, that really need attention and need people to go, wow, I don't really want that purple gallinule to not have a habitat.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Jesus bugs.
Jesus bugs. They're very light, and they have little. They just have kind of legs that are like filaments. And so
exactly
they really do survive on the kind of the surface of the water. They kind of skate across the surface, and that's why they call them that.
Yeah, I love that. So we have a couple comments from the audience that are pretty great. Let's see. Lindsay says that one of her favorite things in Florida so far are the coastal wildlife birds. So she must have loved the reading because that's what it's about. And then and Lexi said that her favorite thing that she saw in Florida was the light up beware of panther signs in the Everglades.
No, I mean, this is the problem with the Florida panther. They have built a highway right in the middle of the glades, right? So it has not only bisected their habitat and their range, but it has also caused inbreeding. And so that is
because they can't get around.
Yeah, it's sad, the state of the Florida panther, but do beware if you're on that highway.
Yeah. Malcolm Spector said the poet shines through in the visceral clarity and beauty of your writing, Virginia. Your descriptions use sound as well as visuals. Oh, not Malcolm, Nancy. Nancy using her husband's account. That's very lovely.
So your book isn't a mystery per se, but there's a lot of mystery around how the father died, yes?
Yes, there is a mystery element to it. I call it a literary novel with a mystery element.
Nice.
And that the mystery kind of, pulls you through the novel, because you can't, like, you just like Lonnie doesn't really want to be there, and yet she can't stop asking questions. Hopefully the reader will have the same feeling that they're in this lush environment and they can't leave because they have to find out the answers to these interesting questions.
I'm sure some of it isn't so beautiful.
Well, there are a few gators and snakes. It wouldn't be Florida without gators.
Yum, 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 yum. Tasty.
But there's a lot of, there's a lot of like family interaction as well. And so I think that's all tied up when you go home, right? You can have natural beauty, and you also have to deal with all these nuances and strains of relationships. So, they're all kind of tied together.
Wonderful. Thank you. We will come back to talking with you.
Thank
Our
you.
final reader tonight is Corbin Addison. He's the international best-selling author of 4 novels: A Walk Across the Sun, The Garden of Burning Sand, The Tears of Dark Water, which won the inaugural Wilbur Smith Adventure Writing Prize in 2016, and A Harvest of Thorns. His most recent book, the one that he will be reading from today, is a work of narrative nonfiction. It's called Wastelands, The True Story of Farm Country on Trial. It is the winner of the 2023 Reed Environmental Writing Award. Corbin's books have been published in more than 25 countries and address some of today's most pressing issues of justice and human rights. So please, Corbin, take it away.
Thanks so much. So here's Wastelands. It's a story of a community in a place that I never would have known existed. It's Eastern North Carolina. It's sort of the remnants of a sort of primordial ocean. So coastal lowlands, and it's basically, the drive-through country. I mean, if you're driving on I-40, you can naturally drive right by and never know it's there. Most people do in North Carolina. It's farm country. And it's a world that now is dominated by the hog industry. So, many years ago, this community was a rural community full of farmers, tobacco farmers, black and white, that got along reasonably well. And they, made their living from the land. And then in the 1960s and 70s, and then especially in the 80s and 90s, Boss Hog came along and built these gigantic industrial hog farms right next door to these neighborhoods. Many of the neighborhoods, the ancestral neighborhoods, are people who are African American and trace their ancestry on the land back to the days of Reconstruction. In some cases, even before that, to the days of slavery. So this community has experienced something that a lot of minority communities across the country have experienced from a number of different industries. And that is, the beauty of the land, the air, the water being polluted and despoiled by an industry that's making billions of dollars and basically leaving nothing behind but despoiled landscape. So it's the story of that community finding a way across a generation to fight back, despite having very few resources, despite basically being able to find no lawyers to represent them for 25 years, despite having the hog industry, which is dominated now by Smithfield Foods, the largest producer and packer of porcine stock in the entire world, in its backyard, and basically, owning and running the legislature in North Carolina. But they were able to fight back, and it's really an extraordinary true story of this community and its ability to find a way to win against all odds and against a multi-billion-dollar, now Chinese-owned conglomerate that again has dominated their landscape for so long. So this reading, I wanted to give that introduction because it helps to explain why I'm going to start with a very simple story, and it is the story of one of the people who grew up on this land, who becomes a plaintiff in the litigation later on. On a summer day in 1958, on a rural plot of land 15 miles northeast of Wallace, North Carolina, a boy named Woodell McGowan ventures out into the sun, his eyes fixed on the dark silhouette of forest to the north. His mother, Dolores, calls out to him to be home by sundown, then returns to her Sunday chores. She's not the woman who brought him into the world, but she's raised him since the day 7 years ago now that his birth mother died. As far as Woodell is concerned, Dolores and her husband, George McGowan, are his parents. He remembers at the age of 3 waking up between them in their little house off Hallsville Road. The fact that they are not his blood means nothing to him. They're his family. And this is their land, Hall land, all 100 acres of it. The land goes back generations in Dolores's line. Woodell knows it like he knows his own home, every crease and fold of it, every patch of field and thicket, hardwood and pine, all the way back to Limestone Creek. The deeds at the courthouse in Kenansville contain a record of the boundaries, but lines drawn on paper mean as much to Woodell as they do to the squirrels and the jays and the crickets that watch over him on his adventures. There are surely places he has yet to see, treasures he has yet to discover, but whatever's out there will not keep its secrets long. He's determined to explore all of it, to map its furthest reaches in his mind until he can find his way blindfolded. For then, in a way, the land will be his too. The big field comes first. Woodell scampers across it in the unhindered manner of youth, half walking, half running, heedless of the motions transporting him. His hands are free and he's carrying nothing on his back. Where he's going, he has all he needs. Past the field is the big house where his mother Dolores and her 4 siblings were raised. In the family, it's called the old home place. Both of Dolores's parents are gone now. Her father, John Richard Hall, died before Woodell was born, and her mother, Mary Jane Hall, passed more recently. John Richard Hall was born in the waning days of the Old South before the curtain closed on slavery. As the story goes, he was young enough that he sat at the foot of his father's bed and didn't have to work in the fields with the other slaves. Then came the war and emancipation and Reconstruction. As soon as he could manage it, John Richard Hall's father, Dolores's grandfather, began acquiring the land that became the 100 acres. Now that John Richard and Mary Jane are gone, Dolores holds title to the land together with her oldest sister, Lily Bell Hall, and her brother Raymond. Beyond the big house, the forest rises up, its branches touching the sky. Woodell races toward the line of shade, then slows when the afternoon sun retreats behind the crown of trees. He enters the woods at a leisurely pace, hopping roots in the speckled light, his feet falling softly on the carpet of leaves and pine needles. As usual, his destination is the creek, but first he heads toward the camp. He sees the meadow before long, wild grass surrounded by pines, and the tent he fashioned with his own hands, burlap threads spread out over a lattice work of branches. If any place in the world is Woodell McGowan's, this is it. He lies down in the shade of the tent. There's just enough room for him to stretch his legs, but that's all the space he needs. He listens to the call of the birds, the whisper of the wind moving through the pine boughs. He watches the hawks pirouetting in the sky and the cloud sails floating high above him. While he is alone, he's not lonely. Indeed, he is never happier than when he is by himself in these woods, with nobody but God for company. In time, he rises again and sets out for Limestone Creek, a quiet tributary of the northeast Cape Fear River that meanders for miles in an arc around the town of Eulahville. There is a pool he frequents on days like this, when even shelter is not enough to break the heat. The pool is too shallow to swim in, but it's clear and cool on his skin and covered by deep shade, and once in a while he sees fish darting among the rocks. At the pool, he takes off his shoes and steps into the gently flowing water. It splashes on his ankles and tickles him enough to make him laugh. He moves his feet deeper until the water laps around his calves. It's a blissful feeling, but the rest of him is coated in sweat. On impulse, he sits down in the water and reclines his body, immersing himself in the stream. As the water washes over him, cleansing his pores and cooling his skin, he looks up through the branches at the gem-cut sky. He doesn't think about the life pulsing through him or where the years ahead will take him. He wastes precious little thought on the future. But even if he pondered it like Aristotle, his mind could not conceive how time will change the land he loves. The forests turned into fields, and the fields converted into industrial farms. The hog barns laid out row upon row, thousands of pigs packed into them like sardines. The great pits hewn into mud and clay to store the waste of a small city, and that waste sprayed out and into the air and onto the soil until the ground can hold no more of it, until a breath smells of effluent and the streams run with poison. Ideas such as these are as foreign to young Woodell as the towers of New York City and the turrets of the Taj Mahal. Nor can Woodell imagine that his path in the coming decades will converge with hundreds of other people like him, and that their collective memories of the land and their passion for its dignity will fuel a titanic battle for the soul of this place, and more broadly, of Eastern North Carolina. Lying in the stream, Woodell is marvelously oblivious to all of this, just as he should be. He's a boy in summer. His belly is full and his heart is light. His family is close by. He's home.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was beautiful. It's so interesting on so many levels. Woodell is how old when this is happening, and how old is he when I'm assuming you interview him and speak with him, but you capture it when like he's young. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, he was 10 years old at the time. And Woodell, unfortunately, we lost him this past year. He died suddenly of a heart attack, but I spent a ton of time with him and befriended him. And he was a pretty taciturn man at the beginning of the litigation back in 2013, 2014. I didn't know him at that point. He was quiet. He didn't really want to talk. And honestly, at the beginning, didn't really want to be a part of it until his neighbors convinced him to. But he was the one person in the entire neighborhood who knew the old stories. I mean, this was his land and his family's land that they were fighting for. And it took some time. I mean, Woodell had a hard life. And one of the things that he left me with that you'll get if you read the book is, more of the story of his life. And he talked about how poor he was and how, he spent basically all of his life poor, working hard scrabble, job to job, trying to raise kids, in a world in which it's very rural. There aren't a lot of opportunities. It's the color line's very clear, and he struggled. But the beauty of the litigation and something that you just wouldn't really expect, but that I heard from so many different community members is that coming together to fight this behemoth and to do so on a battleground they didn't understand, in the courts that they'd never seen before, with lawyers from out of town and in some cases out of state. They bonded in a really unique way and were able to go back down the roads of memory and recover not only feelings that they'd lost about the land itself in the intervening years, but also recover relationships that they had lost and recover a sense of community that they knew when they were children. And that's something that Woodell talked about. And he was, by the end of the litigation, he was quite happy to talk to me, and it was easy to get his story. I will say that the particular story I shared took quite a few conversations because he wasn't, he expected me to be asking him about the trial and asking him about, the hog farm next door. And I did all that. But, once I got past that, I was like, no, Woodell, I actually want to know what it was like to be you in childhood on this land. And I need to be able to bring it to life like a novelist. And that means I need a ton of detail. So tell me a story that meant something to you. And so he started talking about running through the forest and eating blackberries and swimming in the creek. And I was like, okay. So then I started just asking him all these, novelist style detailed questions. And he was patient. He just kept answering. And he was finally like, are you really going to use all that? And I said, well, actually, yeah, because you've given me like this unbelievably beautiful glimpse into the history of this land through your eyes as a 10-year-old boy when nothing in the world is wrong. I mean, that's like the gift of children, is that they come to the world with just an open heart and a sense of glory and wonder, and they haven't been stained. They have not yet, been had their views diminished, by loss and sorrow and all of that. And even though his life growing up was simple, it was just a pure moment, and I was so glad to be able to capture it.
Yeah, it was beautiful, really beautiful.
How did you get engaged in this project? Like, as a novelist, this is straight on nonfiction. How did this transformation happen?
Yeah, it was a drive-by.
Yeah, I mean, people had asked for a long time if I'd ever write a true story, and my response always was, if you could give me a true story that I could write as compellingly as a novel, I'd be glad to do it. But there are a ton of great stories out there in real life. But I've got a lot of journalist friends who dig dry holes for years and don't find one worthy of a book. I mean, maybe one that's worthy of an Atlantic story or, a bunch of news articles, but to hold the weight of a whole book, it really requires a story arc, especially if you're going to write it like I do, because I wanted to tell it, with this really granular level of characterization and with this really sort of, I wanted it to be fast paced and read somewhat like a legal thriller, which is exciting that, lots of people, including the New York Times, called it that. I mean, it's like, yes, it is. It was inspired in part by A Civil Action, which was one of my favorite books back in the 90s. That inspired me to go to law school. Jonathan Harr's phenomenal, true, tale of a big litigation, environmental litigation, actually. And that book, was a huge bestseller, won a ton of awards, and, was turned into a John Travolta movie. That hasn't happened yet with Wastelands. We'll see. But
don't worry, you'll get there.
Yeah, we'll see. But still, it was, so my feeling always was, look, I mean, I'd be glad to tell that kind of story, but I don't know where to find one unless it falls into my lap serendipitously. And that's what this did. I mean, a buddy of mine called me up in January of 2019, and he's a good author friend of mine. And he was like, look, I know this woman from my hometown of Salisbury, North Carolina. I'd heard of Salisbury only because of John Hart. It's a tiny little town in the western Piedmont outside of Charlotte. And he said, this woman is like probably the most successful female attorney in the state. And she's basically taken on, this $2 billion Chinese owned, pork company that's been despoiling the land in these communities for a long time. And I was like, John, wait, what? And he said, yeah, it's about a big litigation about hog farms. I mean, I just, my eyes glazed over. I mean, I immediately wrote it off. I was like, who in the heck is going to want to read a book about hog farms? He then said, he was like, look, I think this could be a story. I mean, you write these, big novels about issues in the world. This is kind of an untold civil rights story, and it's about the environment. And, and I thought, okay, well, I'd at least be willing to have a conversation with the lawyer, Mona Lisa Wallace. I thought, her name's Mona Lisa. That's kind of pretty cool. You can't make that up, like, if the rest of this is as lucky as that. And it turned out that it kind of was. I mean, I think the thing that blew my mind across time from the beginning to the end of the story was the way that it felt to me as I was learning the story. And then as I was living in it at the end, in the last trial and through the appeal, that it just laid itself out as if I would have written it in fiction. I mean, I could not have written it better as a novel if I'd made it up. So that's very unique. I mean, it's very unusual, I think, for true stories to lay themselves out like this, to have even a happy ending. I mean, to have like a villain have a reckoning. I mean, a villain like Smithfield, to have these people who have so little power and who've had their voices diminished and silenced for so long to actually get to speak, and to have 5 juries come back and basically just take the hammer to the giant. I mean, you just kind of don't get to see that a lot in the real world. So,
do you think that your book could be used as a sort of how-to for other communities that are facing this kind of giant off.
Yeah, I did a podcast with a woman who actually has that very kind of angle and a passion for encouraging communities to take up the sword
Together.
against their abusers. I think one of the challenges is like it. I wish I could say that this is something that could be repeated easily. I mean, this was 7 years of litigation. Mona and her co-counsel spent, I don't know how many millions of dollars out of their own pockets in order to take Smithfield down. And they didn't think even to the very, until the first jury came back, they didn't know if it was worth anything at all. So they were taking it on like pro bono lawyers. And that was kind of remarkable. So I think the challenge is that, these battles are really hard to fight. They often don't end well.
And people are starting to actually write about them, though. I just went to see, like 2 weeks ago, I went to see a play that was called The Pitcher Project, which was about Pitcher, Oklahoma. And it was about the first Superfund site. And it was similarly like they needed the entire community to come together. And actually, there was even an indigenous angle in which in that community, the indigenous peoples won a lawsuit to get their land back, even though that land had been destroyed by the mining. And so there was this sort of like, why would you want it back? But then, of course, it was to heal it. It was the answer,
Yeah.
And so it was unfortunately a 4-hour play. It needs to be cut, but but it like it sunk into my head. So like at least it was good in that way. Hey, can we let's do this layout so we can all
so
talk
one of the questions I have and what I find so lovely about this particular salon is that when people think of the environment, they often think of and literature, they often think of it as like setting, right? Like it's like the background or whatever. But the environment, especially in these works, and I'm reading a book right now called Braiding Sweetgrass, is such a huge, like it's there may be a protagonist, but the environment is the main character, right? And it's just so I love this. I love this. When you're talking about when you're reading about Woodell, Corbin, I was thinking about like just the water on his feet and just all those little things that we just take for granted, right? But are so amazing and powerful. And it's those things that we remember when we get older, right? It's those details. It's just so beautiful. Thank you. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the environment as character. Jen, could you start talking about that?
Yeah. So first of all, I just wanted to mention that we had Robin Wall-Kimmer up as our keynote speaker for the Catch My Fae Writers Conference this spring. It was really lovely to hear her talk about sort of what she calls the animacy of non-human beings, which is the way we change our language to include non-humans on the same level that we talk about human characters. But as far as like writing about environment, a lot of my poetry stems from just observing, when I'm out on the land, when I'm doing subsistence activities or camping or things, I feel so compelled by just sort of like the initial beauty and joy of what I'm seeing, that I write down those observations, and almost inevitably they end up becoming a poem, or maybe different observations come together for another poem. But I like to keep my lens on my photography and my lens on my poetry very zoomed in on sort of that one landscape or that one object or that one non-human being. But also,
that matters so much. Like to really see.
And I think for me, that's a matter of trying to maintain my mental health in a situation where climate despair is so, heavy. But also, like when I see these things, the first thing that I see is something that is beautiful, but also the second thing is that I see is something that's under threat. And there is sort of like an anger or a sadness that comes with those things.
Is climate despair a thing that people say? Like, is that it sounds like it should be a thing. Like,
yeah, I know it absolutely
climate
is.
despair is like.
Yeah, so as a matter of fact, I just contributed to a project at the Anchorage Museum, River Lab, by an artist named Mary Mattingly, who assembled a library as part of this exhibition, and the number of titles that were just committed to sort of this, like, not despairing about climate issues, and because that's really the enemy of, like, shifting public opinion, is just people feeling so helpless, that I'm just one person, I can't do anything, or there's no point, we're already past the point of no return. But when we focus on sort of like the joy and the beauty of these non-human beings, then we can feel a little bit more hopeful, I think, and also draw public eye to these things that they're either not aware of or don't think about very often.
Yeah, Jen, it's funny. I just was teaching a workshop about the environment and writing and how to do it in ways that are the most powerful, and that's part of the reason why I was reading Braiding Sweetgrass. And what I thought was so interesting was the way she brings in her heritage, but she also talks about the actual details in her current life, right? So it's about the environment, but it's also so much more. So beautiful.
Yeah, I was just really excited to hear her talk about it. So she went to school and is a botanist, I believe. She's a scientist, and then she talked about how she entered school and was sort of despairing at the way that indigenous ways of thinking and knowing were sort of not included or pushed away. And I really like how she finds the intersection between those things. That was really heartening to see.
Yeah,
I think
really
more broadly, you can't really have a holistic conversation about environment or climate without incorporating indigenous knowledge or acknowledging indigenous stewardship. And going back to that climate despair thing, I'm just one person, but when I cast my eye and focus my lens on what I know and what is around me in my local community, that's a lot more of a manageable thing. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Regaining to part of love is a part of despair is the love, the wishing, the wanting it to come back. And honestly, giving up on that is sad, right? One wants to, like, the despair is giving up on the hope. And I think that even in a very, very small way, like just writing down the memory, just acknowledging that this happened, that this is a thing, that this is, looking at it, can rekindle the love, and which would then hopefully rekindle the action.
Yeah,
to
Virginia,
be able to,
you were talking about this before, about really focusing in on those details that are getting kind of lost.
Yeah.
Right, because I know the wetlands are getting decimated, and when it gets decimated, nobody remembers.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I love that book too, Braiding Sweetgrass, because every time I pick it up, I think I have to live differently. I have to think about, and she talks about, we respect Mother Earth, and she loves us. If we don't respect her, that's when we don't get the love. And I think that's true when it comes to, as you're talking about, the wild places that people don't visit enough and don't see and don't get that love, don't receive what you receive when you go someplace that's very wild. And like Corbin's talking about, this stream, this forest that was there. I heard someone else recently talking about, we live in paradise. and we don't know it, and we won't know it until we no longer have it, and then we'll see that we lived in. So I think that whole, I don't know, turning a blind eye to something is dangerous. And I also do think, we can't lose hope, because that's not constructive. But it's an interesting human trait that we can't really recognize beauty.
Until it's gone.
Beauty, Christina. Yeah, until we see what is on the other side.
Yeah, it's so disheartening when people talk about paradise in the Bible and like, when you die, you go to paradise. It's like, dude, like it's here, right here. Like you don't need to die to go to paradise. It's right here.
That's right.
There's a really good art project that Maya Lin, the architect and artist, is doing, which is online, and I cannot remember the name of it because nouns. But but it is online, and probably if you Google like her name and art project, you'll probably find it. But it is a repository of personal memories of places and things that have to do with locations, so that it would be exactly what you're talking about, Jen, when you say like your mother knew that you could walk or see the glacier from one place, and then now you have to take a ferry, like that kind of thing. And people are just
log in their information.
Any human being anywhere in the world can choose their like hometown or their wherever they went to high school or whatever, and just write a story about a thing that they remember about nature. And it's quite fabulous as a concept. And,
this is what is so great about literature, right? Because like Jen, you are preserving moments, and in both word and in the visual medium. And Corbin, you're capturing in a kind of a novelistic way what was versus what is, on that location now. And I think it's really important that writers keep writing these themes, keep writing about what we have, what we're about to lose or could lose. And when people enter into story, when people enter into image, it's really powerful.
Yeah. It actually takes the person going like, yeah, I'm on the path to actually looking at things and seeing them. Right.
So I want to read what Lexi said because it was really good. I think we can recognize beauty just fine, but we definitely appreciate it differently or more when it's going away or soon to be gone. And it's something that we as humans don't like to think about, that we're all going to be gone, but that idea that maybe like our kids, for anybody who doesn't know that Pen Parentis is about kids, it isn't. It's about our parents. It's about us. But it is. So what our mission is to keep writers on creative track after they have kids. So every person that we present on our monthly salons always has kids. So these guys, all you guys, have written all these amazing things, published, won prizes, and they all have kids. So it's partly just to show that this is possible. You can do it. Don't give up. Like go right in the parking lot while your kid is at swim lessons. You can do this. And we do, in addition to the monthly salons, we also have an annual fellowship for a writer who has a child under 10. And we will be presenting that fellow next month in November. We're very, very excited. Taylor Hobbs is the new fellow, and she spent a couple of years living on a sailboat with teeny little kids, and it's like kind of exciting, and she's very cool. And but that's for another month. But these salons are once a month at 7:00 on a Tuesday if you're on the East Coast, at 2:00 or 3:00 in Alaska, and all the time zones in between, and whatever time it is in Sydney right now, probably 6 a.m. Thank you for coming through. And but we do this all the time, and we also have weekly meetups for writers who have kids. You can be any. Basically, you're career can be at any stage. We've had National Book Award finalists, and we have had emerging writers who have never published anything. And basically you come together in a Zoom once a month, you build community among other parent writers. You do not have to be in the same space, you just have to be in the same Zoom. So time is irrelevant. And you build a real literary community, because as I was saying in the green room, well, sorry, once a week. It's every week. You come once a week,
and it's an accountability.
Yeah, you set goals, and people care that you actually got your writing done. Basically, they care about what you're writing. They want to help you, and they do help you. It is, the hour is up, but I want to like go to some of these exciting. There's so many exciting like comments in the comment section, and I want to just quickly go through before we leave. So if you guys can stay for a few minutes, there's a few that are just lovely. Therese Svoboda was telling us about a lawsuit that her sister had put against her while she tried to sue hog farmers for environmental destruction in Nebraska. And then there was, gosh, there's so many. There was this one. My favorite example of, oh no, the environment, is when they did so much deforestation in Oklahoma that they caused the Dust Bowl. Like, wild, who knew we needed trees? Yes.
Actually, you know, when Corbin was reading, I was thinking about Hawaii, because the fires were caused because water had been basically funneled away from the land and the people who lived there to create pineapples. Yeah. And that's what created the drought over time. So,
Corbin, tell us real quick, you won this Reed Environmental Writing Award. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Because maybe people will write things and want to win this award. Tell us about this award. Seriously, incentivize us.
The Southern Environmental Law Center is a really cool nonprofit organization that does impact litigation and also lobbies Congress and state houses for all the right reasons, to try to get politicians off their tails and, thinking about something other than who's giving them money for their next campaign. And it's a lovely group that I supported in different ways through the years. But they have this award, and it's actually really cool that a nonprofit group would give an award like this, because typically, and I'm a lawyer by training, but typically lawyers aren't totally clued in to the fact that actually public relations and storytelling can actually be a heck of a lot more engaging for an audience than listening to lawyers talk. So what's really fun about it is that they're super PR savvy, and they're like, look, we believe that storytelling is extremely powerful and want to support. So they've been giving this award out for a couple decades, and they do it, in this big ceremony. It's ironically in my hometown of Charlottesville is where they have the ceremony every year, which I don't think biased me in favor, but nevertheless, it was fun to bring my family out. And so I mean, I think you have to submit for it. I mean, it's like pretty much any prize.
Is it a written? Do you know if the book has to already be published, or is it a manuscript?
So they have two awards. Wait a minute. They might have three. I can't remember. I at least remember the two categories. One is a full-length book, and then another is a news article. So the journalist who won was a CNN journalist who wrote a really lovely, interactive, visually rich story about what is the technical term for it? Anyway, I mean, there's a really unique natural environment in I want to say Louisiana, a riverine environment that is being threatened by, I can't remember if it was coal slag or something like that.
Oh yeah.
So anyway, she wrote a beautiful article. And so they give away, two different awards every year, one for a book. I think it's two, one for
Well, there you go, our writers out there. You love this earth. Go and write about this earth. Write about it despite the fact
that your writing matters.
Your writing matters. Your voice matters. We want to hear all the things, the poetry, the novels, the nonfiction, everything. Like, make it matter, write beautiful things. Yes, thanks again to our DeGroat Foundation friends and the Poetry Foundation for supporting us, as well as
Thank you.
NISCA, the NEA, and the DCLA in New York City. And of course, butterdocs.com. Don't forget that you can download a little trial of their amazing thing. They have a launch coming up on October 25th, to which you are all invited. If you get on our mailing list, then you can find out even more, because
and
we send out
before we
information.
go,
Yep.
in November, the theme is
Yeah.
collateral damage. We have
Yeah.
authors Nancy Ludmere, Michael Bourne, and Marina Budos. So everyone,
Yes, and we will be
then.
presenting our winner of our fellowship
Yes.
as well, Taylor Hobbs, and you'll get to hear her amazing story. And everybody, we will see
Thank
you
you
next month.
to our authors.
Wave
Thank
and
you,
be pretty.
thank you.
Bye.
Can't wait to read your books.
Thank you.